Hello all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in day 5 of Azure storage account series, today we are going to discuss about security best practices. Like what all the options we have to secure our storage account and the data which we are going to store inside Azure storage account services. So let's understand. So why security in Azure storage account is important? Because we are going to store our databases, logs, images, videos, like any kind of data we are going to store which require a security. So any unauthorized user cannot access our data. So there are few options are available as part of Azure storage account securities. The very first we have access key. Second, we have shared access signature, and third, we have managed identities. So access key is a less secure, shared access signature is more secure than the access key, and managed identities is the most secure way. So let's understand each of the options in more detail. So access key. So this is the basically default authentication method for Azure storage account. Because so for example you are you are developing any application which require to fetch the data from Azure storage account, so in that you need some kind of authentication mechanism. So for that we can use access keys. Actually we can utilize all the three features, but there are some limitations when it comes to the managed identities that we will cover in little later. So let's understand the access key part first. So whenever we create a Azure storage account, by default it create two keys, 512 bit access keys. So these keys are called like primary key and secondary key. So these keys basically provide full control over the storage account. Like it could be a blob, file, queue, and tables. So if we are using access key as a default authentication method, in that case our data, whatever we are going to store in Azure storage account, that will be less secure, because the default we will have the complete access over all of the storage account, like all over the all of the data which we are going on to store in different services. For example, if somebody got the access key, they will have full control on blob files, queues, and table services. So that's why it is not recommended to use access key because of security reasons. So what all the risk involved if we are using access keys? So the very first is full access to storage account. If the access key is leaked, then anyone can use your Azure storage account. Second, difficult to manage. You need to rotate them manually. That we will see when we will do a demo. We will see like how basically you have to rotate and what all the primary and secondary key as well. And last risk is not suitable for granular permission. There is no way you can restrict the access. That's why it is less secure. And what all the best practices if you still want to use access keys? The very first thing, you have to store your access key in a very secure location. For example, if you are using Azure services, then you can use Azure Key Vault. Second, you have to regularly rotate your access keys to reduce the security risk. Third, we have avoid embedding access keys in application code or configuration file. So you should not hard code these access key in your application code or in any of the configuration file which you are going to use. So these are the best practices you have to follow if you are using access key. Next we have shared access signature. So this is something called a fine grained access control option. What happened in shared access signature? So basically these are the tokens which we need to generate, and this will allow us to restrict the access at resource level. For example, if we want to give access to a blob service only, then we can use this feature, because we will not provide access to file storage, table storage, and queue storage. We will only allow access to blob storage if we are using shared access signature. And here basically we can also restrict, okay, how long we want to give access to particular user. For example, 1 hour, 2 hour, or maybe 1 day, 2 day, like we can customize that thing. So there are few types of SAS token which we get. The very first is account SAS. which is basically grant access to multiple services in a storage account. Second, we have service shared access signature, which basically grant access to a specific resource like a blob or queue. So if you are using account shared access signature, it means you can grant access to multiple services. For example, blob, file, table, and queue. If you are using service shared access signature, then you can grant access to the particular resource, like either you want to provide access to blob storage or queue storage or table or file. Next, we have user delegation shared access signature. This is basically use Azure AD authentication for additional security. Now let's see what all the key benefits we will get as part of shared access signature. So the very first is time limited access. Like we can define how long we want to give access to particular user. Second, we have restrict permission. So we can define, okay, this particular user can only read the data, not write the data. So all these permissions we can restrict as part of shared access signature. And we can also restrict IP addresses, like we can specify a particular range of IP address, like we want to allow to access a storage account from these limited IP addresses. So that also we can do as part of shared access signature. Now we'll talk about best practices. Always set an expiration date on SASH token. So whenever you are going to create a SASH token, you have to define a expiry date. Use IP restriction to limit access to trusted sources. So these are the best practices we have to follow if we are using shared access signature. So this is more secure in comparison to shared access key. Now we have managed identity. This is the most secure approach, but this is only applicable whatever the Azure resources support Azure AD authentication. That resources we can integrate with. Basically, that resources can use managed identities to access Azure storage account. So for example, if you are using virtual machines, if you are using Azure Kubernetes services or using Azure App Services, Azure Function, so for that basically you can utilize this feature manage identities. If you see in Azure storage account, you cannot see manage identities tab. Even you cannot see identity tab in Azure storage account. So these manage identities you have to enable in the resources which are going to utilize or which are going to integrate with Azure storage account. Now let's understand the benefits. So there is no key or password. So it's kind of role based access control which you will basically grant. Now if we talk about best practices, so use managed identities whenever possible. So like what all the resources support AD authentication, you can utilize manage identities for that resources. Always apply role based access control instead of hard coded keys. So like if you want somebody to only read the data, so you can provide for example blob reader role, writer role. So that's how basically you can define if you are using managed identities. So basically role based access control you can define over managed identities which you want to use. So we will see in a demo how basically we can utilize a feature of managed identities. So there are common security mistakes which we should avoid. Leaving storage account open to public access. So whenever we are going to create Azure storage account, we should not open for public access. Either we can use private storage account, or we can restrict the access. Using hard-coded access keys in application. If you are going to use access keys in your application, you should not hard code. You have to use Azure Key Vault or similar services. Generating long-lived SaaS tokens. So always set an expiry time, maybe a week, 2 or a month. So you should not like set the expiry date of like for example 1 year, 2 year. That should not do. Granting access permissions. Follow the principle of least privilege. Like like based on the requirement, you should define or you should grant the permission to the user. If somebody wants only reader role, you should allow only reader access. If somebody want read and write, then you have to assign read and write access to particular user. Now let's move to a demo. So let me go to my Azure storage account. So I already have created Azure storage account. So if you want to know how you can create Azure storage account, then you can watch out day 2 video where I have explained in more detail. So this is the storage account which we are going to use for manage identities demo. So let me quickly show you the access key and shared access signature part. So whenever, as soon as you open your storage account, under security and networking, you can see an option called access key. So these are the two access key. This is the primary access key and this is the secondary access key. So if I show here, so you can see the value of this particular key, and this is the connection string which you have to use in your application or whenever it required. So these keys you have to always rotate. For example, this key one is starting with MHY. Let me rotate it. So basically what it does, it will regenerate the new key. So you can see the value got changed, NTX. It means if you are using access key, you have to always rotate your primary key and secondary key. So always share key one with developers or users which want to access, and secure key 2 for in case if you forget key 1, then you can utilize key 2. Now it's when it comes to a shared access signature part. So you can see, so we have allowed services blob, file, queue and table. So and allowed resources type, services, container, event, object label, and these are the permission we can define if we are using shared access signature. So what you have to do, for example, I want to assign access to a blob only, so we will uncheck these options, and we want permissions only read and write, delete, list, add, create, all these permissions we will uncheck. Now we will set your expiry date, okay, from which date to which date we have to grant access. Even we have the time zone as well, so we can specify allowed protocol HTTPS or HTTP and HTTPS both. So for example, I am assigning it till 24, and let me change the time is fine. So signing key, so these shared access signature will utilize the access key, key 1 and key 2. So why I'm not able to see generate, let me quickly check. So let me, okay, this option is disabled, I'm not sure why. Let me quickly change the date as well. Okay, okay, so basically we have to, here we have not selected any allowed resources like service level or container level or object level. So for means, for example, we want container level, so let's click on container, and here you can generate a sash and connection string. So basically you will get a connection string, sash token and the URL. So these details you can use in your application which want to connect to the Azure storage account. Now the next option we have manage identity. So you can see we don't see any identity option here. So what we are going to do, we are going to create a Azure app service, and from the Azure app service we will fetch the data which we will store in the blob container. So if I'll go to data management here, let me click OK. So if I'll go to, sorry, not data management, under data storage, so we have containers here. So I have already created a container called tempo. Let me create a new container, and let's put the name of demo, and let me create a container. So now what we will do, inside this demo container we will upload a sample text file. So we will read the data using the manage identities. So let me quickly create a file here. So this is the notepad file and this is my demo app. So let me quickly save it, and here I will give name demo.txt. Let me quickly save on desktop. Now what I will do, I will upload this particular file because from the Azure App Service we want to read the data which we have written in a demo file. Okay, so it's completed. Now let me go to my app services. So we don't have any app services. Let me quickly create a web app. So here I will use my resource group and name I will give demo app 1231, some random name. This name should be unique. And the publish method I want code, and runtime I'll choose .NET 8, and operating system I will choose a Linux. Location I will choose Central India here. Okay, now we will use a pricing plan B1. This is fine. We don't have any databases. Okay, we will leave default everything. Okay, we don't want any monitoring. Let me quickly review and create. So this app service will take couple of minutes. Meantime, what I will do, I will go to my uh, Azure DevOps, where I have created a sample code for this app service, which where we like basically this particular code we will deploy on app service. So this is very simple code. So let me go to my repos, and you can see that repo name here is manage identity demo. So this is, if I'll go here, my app.cs project file. So here I just defined the packages and all, and the target framework which we want to use. And in the program.cs file I have defined my storage account blob URL. So I will update or change this URL with the new container which we have created. So let me go to here. Okay, so this deployment is completed. Now let me go back to my Azure portal. So we want the blob service URL here. So for that I will go to my Azure storage account and let me open it, and I'll go to container, and here I will go demo and demo.txt. So because we want to read the data from this file, so I'll take the URL from here. Let me go to my program.cs file and I will just update the URL here. Okay, so this is completed, and this is the Azure pipeline.ml file. So here basically I'm just building the .NET core, we are publishing the package, and we are deploying to the Azure app service. So here also I have to change the name of our application, which is web app. So let me copy the name here and let me edit it. So here I will change the name and let me commit it as well. So if I will browse my application now, so you can see a default uh, page which we generally got without, like, we have not deployed anything yet. So let's quickly load it. So this is the default page we are getting when we browsing our application. So now what we want to retrieve the data which we have written in demo.txt file in a Azure storage account. So for that, what I will do, I will run this code. So let me go to my pipeline here. and this is the pipeline which I have created. So let me run the pipeline. So this will deploy the application to Azure App Services, and this app service basically will give us an output of the text which we have written in demo.txt file. But before that, what we have to do, we have to enable a manage identities, because there is no connection authentication between Azure App Service and Azure Storage account. So for that, what we have to do, manage identities we cannot enable in Azure Storage account because we don't have option over there. So what we will do, we will enable a manage identities as part of Web App Services. So for that, I'll go to settings, and here you can see the option called identities. So here I will enable system assigned manage identities, or you have option for user assigned manage identity as well. So let me click on same. Now this identity basically we have to assign in Azure storage account. So let me go to my Azure storage account. So here if I go to access control, so we just only want to read the data. So what I will do, I will add here new role assignment. So this is called a role based access control, and here I will search for blob data reader role, and here I will use manage identities. So we have system assigned manage identities, and the name is demo f1231, which is the name of our app service. And let me click on save, and next review and assign. Let's quickly verify if pipeline, okay, deployed to Azure web app failed. Okay, failed to deploy a web app. Package deployment using chip deploy failed. Okay, so let me quickly edit it. Let's see what happened. So let me edit my pipeline here. So if I go to settings here, so let me choose a subscription which is ADO demo web app on Linux. It's fine. App name is also correct. Okay, so let me add it again and run it. So let me go back to my Azure portal. So manage identities assigned. If I'll role assignment, we can see a manage identities called demo f1231, which has storage blob data reader role we have assigned in Azure storage account. So we can now retrieve, or we can now read the data. Let me go back to my pipeline. Let's wait until this pipeline will be succeeded. So here we can see a message called successfully deployed web package to app services. So let me quickly go back to my app service, and let me go to my app service, and let me browse it. Let's see if still we are getting a home page or the content. Okay, so now we are getting a content which we have declared in our demo.txt file. It means the authentication is successful between Azure App Service and storage account, and we have not hard coded any credentials like access keys or shared access signature. Everything we have done with the help of managed identities. So that's how basically you can secure your application if you are using Azure storage account with managed identities. What you have to keep in mind, you can use managed identities only for those resources who support Azure Active Directory authentication. So that's all for today. See you next video. Thank you so much.